Namaskar and welcome to Sansad Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our show Perspective, where we bring you detailed analysis of key national and international issues. Today we're going to talk about India and Egypt relations. Now, India and Egypt have agreed to elevate their bilateral ties to strategic partnership covering political, security, defense, energy and economic aspects. This was decided during the bilateral talks between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Egyptian President Abdel Fattah El-Sisi, who was also the chief guest at India's 74th Republic Day celebrations. Both leaders held discussions over a wide range of issues on Wednesday, with 5 agreements signed on cooperation in areas of culture, information technology, cybersecurity, youth matters and broadcasting as well. Both sides were also unanimous in their view that terrorism is the most serious security threat to humanity and concrete measures are needed to end cross-border terrorism. Being two of the world's oldest civilizations, India and Egypt have always enjoyed a history of close contact from ancient times. India is now keen to further expand these ties with Egypt, which is also a key player in politics of both the Arab world and Africa as well. So for more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of experts and we'll try and understand various aspects of this relationship from them. Let me first introduce the panel to you. We have with us Professor Rajaram Panda, who is joining us here, Senior Fellow at the Nehru Memorial Museum and Library in New Delhi. Welcome, Professor Panda. Former Ambassador Virendra Gupta is also joining us. Mr. Gupta, welcome to you as well. And Senior Journalist Primit Pal Chaudhary is also with us. He is a Foreign Affairs Editor with the Hindustan Times. Welcome, Primit, to the show. I'll begin with you, Professor Panda, first, and I'll bring in Mr. Gupta also after that. On the historical perspective as well, let's try and understand where do these two countries come from when we're talking about the present context. Let's try and understand the relations which both nations have shared so far, and the ancient ties which I was talking about.
As you mentioned very rightly, we both India and Egypt are very ancient civilizations, and somehow I get the impression that over the years, over the decades, I would say, I think this bilateral ties remained a little low-key. What actually we're trying to do now during Prime Minister Modi's tenure should have been done a bit earlier also, because you have a very robust background in the relationship. If we go back to the Nehru and Nasser, the non-alignment, the concept and all, I think after that, somehow, I got the impression that the relationship were not nurtured the way it was expected. And I think now is the right time, and it is so relevant, because if we see the geographical location of Egypt, it is in fact it is in the interest of both India and Egypt to explore the relationship in various various areas, including defense, security, maritime issues. Terrorism is, as you mentioned, terrorism is one very key issues now, which is troubling not only Egypt and India, but also many countries in the region.
Okay.
And I think it is very appropriate that the Modi government has tried to reach out Egypt, and in fact, the very invitation to be the chief guest of the Republic Day celebration is not a on the spur decision. A lot of background analysis has have gone into gone behind this, and why actually India would like to invest and rethink, rebuild, and nurture the old relationship, which actually remained not explored to the potential which it should have been done. And I think it is very, very appropriate that I think now the present government has tried to reach out. And we are going to see a new era in the relationship, which will have a major economic drive, because in terms of trade and investment, and also Egypt as the gateway to reach out to the African continent, which will be very, very crucial from the Indian point of view. Yes.
Indeed,
Yeah,
indeed.
yeah.
Those are the key elements and aspects there. Mr. Gupta, I'd like to bring you in here. As Professor Panda is pointing out as well, the ancient ties apart and the fact that relationship, after India's independence was on a very solid footing when during the non-aligned movement days as well. From there onwards till now, that's one aspect. And two, we would also like to understand some of the points mentioned by Professor Panda, but why is India important to Egypt and vice versa as well?
Well, to add on what Professor Panda has said, we share a very strong partnership in the post-colonial era. Our commitment to opposition to bloc politics, and that is why we both were very active members of non-aligned movement. And also in terms of commitment to creating a socialistic pattern of society, a democracy of that kind. So I think personal chemistry between Nasser and Nehru, and I think it created a tremendous amount of goodwill and friendship between our two countries, both at government and at people-to-people level, which I have experienced myself during my posting in Cairo. Now, today, when Prime Minister Modi has taken the initiative to strengthen Global South and to create a voice for Global South through India's presidency of G20, I think India's old partnership with Egypt becomes really relevant. And Egypt, in my opinion, would play a very important role in contributing to this Global South Alliance and creating a voice for the South. Now, you asked me the question as to why both countries are important.
Important to each other.
Now,
Yeah.
India is emerging as an important power. I would not say a global power, but India is emerging as a very fast-growing economy, also on the political spectrum of the world. And Egypt, as Professor Panda said, in terms of its location, is very strategically located, controls the access of all maritime routes which are important to India. The Suez Canal, a large amount of our trade passes through Suez Canal with Europe. Otherwise, we'll be completely choked. So I think Egypt plays a very important role. But from the other perspective as well, Egypt is the cultural capital of the Arab world. It is the most populous country in the Arab world, and it is the most important country, I would say, culturally, as a field of education. Most of the leaders you would find in Arab world having had some connection with Al-Azhar University in Egypt.
Okay.
So I think Egypt has always played a very important role in the cultural and intellectual world of the Arab this thing. It's very center stage.
Okay.
And therefore, Egypt has to be very important from India's perspective. From trade perspective, our trade is growing, but there are certain aspects of trade. Egypt has very rich deposits of phosphate, and we've been buying some phosphate. I think that is going to play a very important role as we look at the fertilizer requirement within India.
Okay.
Also, oil and gas. We've been sourcing oil and gas also from Egypt, which is extremely crucial from the perspective of our diversification of the energy supplies.
Okay.
So when we begin to diversify and move away from the over-reliance on the Gulf countries, I think our purchases, however modest it might be, from Egypt becomes extremely important.
Okay, okay, that's a wonderful way of putting how we have to understand how both nations are equally important for each other and their interests as well in the global geopolitical scenario as well. Pramit, I'd like to bring you in here. In terms of your views of India-Egypt relationship, which has moved ahead across all these decades, how has it developed? And now that it has been both sides have agreed to elevate it to the strategic partnership level, what does that signify? How will it change things from here onwards?
Yeah, so I think that at the heart of the strategic side is that India has been developing a loose coalition. Coalition is a strong word, but a strong relationship with a series of, should we say, moderate Arab nations between here and roughly North Africa. The key country in this is the United Arab Emirates.
Okay.
The ITU2 agreement that we have, which incorporates the United States, Israel, the UAE. But it's important to realize that the fifth unmentioned member of this is Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is not a formal member only because it does not recognize Israel yet. But the ITU2 fundamentally is designed to build a trade, technology, finance, and connectivity corridor between India and all the way to the Eastern Mediterranean. And it's important to realize that if you look at the connectivity plans that the UAE has proposed under this agreement, they will run to both Jordan, Israel, and Egypt. They will conclude there. Egypt has developed a very strong relationship under General Sisi with the UAE and Saudi Arabia, especially at a time when they're facing some economic distress. It's been these two countries that have poured both investment and aid into helping sustain the Sisi regime. So we have now effectively, India is building this relationship. It already had a good close relationship with Oman historically. It's now becoming close to the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Egypt in this block of nations running across this part of the Arab world.
Okay.
We're also reaching out to some degree to Morocco, and we've always had a decent relationship with Algeria. But this core of countries is being something we have been very focused on. And one of the elements of way to measure that, for example, is at a time when we were facing some issues in terms of grain, wheat production. We agreed, however, that certain core countries would still regain wheat exports from us. And in the Arab world, it was Egypt, which received 61,000 tons, Syria and Yemen and the UAE, all of which received wheat exports from India from our emergency stocks.
Okay.
But it was because we saw those countries as strategically important. I wouldn't say this coalition is actually aimed against anybody, but I think it is also relatively clear that one of the reasons we are moving closer to this group is we continue to have at least rhetorical problems with some countries, largely those allied with Turkey. Turkey, Azerbaijan, and a few others have taken a very strong pro-Pakistani position on Kashmir. All of these other Arab countries have basically said it's no longer an issue as far as they are concerned, but Turkey and Azerbaijan continue to do so. Egypt and Turkey are hostile to each other and have been since the Muslim Brotherhood government was overthrown and Sisi came back to power.
Okay.
It's one of the reasons we're also still maintaining this relationship with Egypt.
Okay. That explains, the idea of elevating the relationship to strategic partnership. Now, Mr. Gupta, taking it from where Pramit left, cooperation in defense and security is one aspect of it, and very important as well. Cybersecurity is another one. But both leaders, after that bilateral meeting, in their remarks, mentioned very strongly about the issue of terrorism, specifically the cross-border terrorism, how that needs to be dealt with, and further cooperation between both the nations. What does that signify?
In fact, I would regard cooperation in anti-terrorism, counter-terrorism, as the most fundamental and strong pillars of our relationship. We must remember that even though Egypt, by and large, has become very rapidly Islamized, and if there were to be an election, there would be an Islamic religious government elected. But it is not that situation. Today's government is essentially a continuation of the military government of Mubarak, which runs a very authoritarian system and keeps the Islamic militants at bay. So I think if we talk in very basic terms, both India and Egypt have very strong interest in countering radical tendencies.
Radical elements.
And therefore, there is a very strong basis for cooperation. Egypt is very strategically located in the midst of the hotbed of terrorism, as it were. And therefore, it is my belief that Egypt will have access to very important information. And if we can create a more systematic exchange of information and cooperation with them, I think it will help both the countries. And therefore, rightly, the leaders have emphasized on this aspect. Apart from, of course, the defense cooperation which has been going on, interoperability, there have been exercises at both military and the Air Force levels. So I think in overall terms, we have taken this relationship forward. There was some reference to how we, the view on Pakistan, or Pakistan has been able to, influence members in OIC and elsewhere. I, for one, would not want to see any relationship from the prism of India-Pakistan, because I think India is far more important player on the world stage today. And India is capable of establishing a standalone relationship with Egypt, which is precisely what is happening. I think it is important, given Prime Minister Modi's, if you look at systematically, he's gone about improving relationship with key players in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Iran, and I think Israel, of course, we've had good relationship. And I think Egypt is the other key to this jigsaw puzzle. And I think we, in that sense, really complete the picture. And it contributes to a very comprehensive relationship. Economic terms, political terms, diplomatic terms, with the entire Middle East, which is going to be extremely important for us.
Now that's really important as well, because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's our interest which we have to look forward to from a global perspective and from our own perspective as well. Professor Panda, on this aspect of as Mr. Gupta was saying, that trying to establish a strong relationship with an independent strong relationships with important players across the globe, and therein, when we come to Egypt, we look at areas of cooperation, and some of them were already mentioned and discussed by both Permit and Mr. Gupta as well. But apart from security, apart from the issues of dealing with the cross-border terrorism or cooperation in cybersecurity field, when we talk about people-to-people contact or trade or economy as well, where do we stand? What level are we, and where should we be pushing forward?
You see, if I can highlight 3 or 4 key points in the context of understanding the evolving relationship between the two countries. One will be the importance of the Indian diaspora in the Middle East. Now the thrust of the present government is to engage with the diaspora all over the world, not only in the Middle East. So how actually we can leverage their role in the building up of relationship, friendly relationship with those countries where they live. That is number one. Number two, in the defense cooperation, it has been clearly stated now during this, one of the 5 agreements which have been signed, that there is a possibility that there could be the Egypt might be interested to import certain defense equipment from India, which probably India will seriously consider and helping them. Number 3 is in the economic front. Now, at present, somehow I get the feeling that the potentials are not fully exploited. The bilateral trade is, I think, in the tune of about $7 billion or so, which is not, to me, it appears, does not reflect the full potential. And I think it has been envisaged that I think to increase this bilateral trade volume to about $12 12 million or maybe I think 15 million by 2027, which is possible. The fourth point, which I would like to stress is, Egypt can be a potential hub for manufacturing Indian products for reaching out to the African continent. Because there, Egypt has got many free trade agreements with some of the African countries, which will facilitate the export of Indian products manufactured in Egypt, which will be a very, very win-win situation for both the countries. So, of course, people-to-people contact, the tourism, being the ancient civilizations, both the countries, they're all, potentials are huge. Only it is only up to us how to actually, we exploit it to our mutual advantage.
Pramit, your views there on this aspect of Egypt's geographical location, its significance, and you earlier spoke about, and both Mr. Gupta and Professor Panda were also referring to the significance vis-a-vis the Arab world. But when we're talking about the African continent as well, how does Egypt play an important role from your point of view?
So Egypt, as you will know, is one of the biggest African countries in terms of population. I believe it's number 2, or number 3. And so it's of importance, and it's an unusual country because it is both part of the Arab world and the Middle East as well as Africa. And as President Sisi has said, he would like India to treat Egypt as a gateway to Africa. Now, Africa is a big continent; it's the second biggest continent in the world. So it's not like we can only have one gateway. So we use South Africa, for example, or Mozambique in the south. We maintain relationships with Nigeria and so on in the west. But there's a huge swath of Africa between the Horn of Africa to Morocco, in the Sahel region and so on, where we have a number of economic interests and some strategic interest because of our concerns about the rise of the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda, especially in the lower Sahel. And Egypt being also militarily the most powerful of the African states. It's a country that we've been working closely with in some of those areas. The Horn of Africa is of particular importance in the Red Sea because it continues to be one of our primary main maritime areas in terms of connectivity and movement of trade to Europe, and will continue to do so. It is also one of the key bottlenecks and entry points into the Indian Ocean. And that's been, of course, a major maritime concern for us. So Egypt, again, is a key partner in that. If, as it seems, Egypt is now contemplating buying weapons from us, that, as you know, is a major push by the present government, that we should also become a major arms exporter to sustain our domestic industrial production. That would be a real add-on. Because when you buy a weapon system from another country, you are in effect saying that you trust your relationship with that country, in this case Egypt's, that their security will be entrusted to India for at least the next 25 years. And that's going to be a huge push for us. And if Egypt buys, we can expect many other countries in Africa and to some degree the Middle East to start looking at India and taking us a lot more seriously on that front.
And that increases the larger influence of India across the world as well, and further solidifies those relationships which we are trying to, or moving ahead rather, forging with these nations. Thank you so much, Pramit there, Mr. Gupta and Professor Panda as well, for sharing your views and insight. We're running short of time. We'll come back again with this topic. So as our panelists were pointing out very clearly, the significance of India-Egypt bilateral relationship and the reason why both countries are so keen on taking this relationship to the next level, focusing on various aspects, specifically cooperation in defense sector vis-a-vis counter-terrorism efforts, information technology, people-to-people contacts, and cybersecurity as well. Economy and trade, of course, are the other two cornerstones of this relationship. We'll come back again with a different topic. Till then, keep watching Sansad Television. Thank you.